Hello friends, Clage back with another Punishing Grey Raven guide today, and we are going to be talking about our newest S-rank physical breaker, Karenina Effulgence. Karen arrives to bolster the physical team and will be replacing either Mama Han Ying or Selena Pianissimo, depending on the investment levels of those characters on your current squad. I'll have more details on that when we get down to the team composition section. But nonetheless, Karen will be a nice boost for the physical team and its first breaker class character. In addition, Karen comes with the Darkflow elemental effect. And just like all of my guides, this guide is going to focus solely on her main element, so we'll talk about the physical aspect of her kit, rotations, all that good stuff. And once we have a proper Darkflow Warzone and I have a chance to test out the new team along with new builds and figure out what a good rotation is for that elemental effect, I will do a fully updated Darkflow team guide somewhere down the road during the patch. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of everything going on with this guide, I do want to drop an important disclaimer here, so if you would please pay attention before we move on to all the actual stuff you want to learn about. This is the second full recording of this guide, and the reason for that is I only got access to testing Karenina about 48 hours prior to the new patch. In addition to that, the original testing environment did not have hardly any of the skill tooltips or evolutions translated. This meant I had to go in by phone using my Google Lens and hand translate everything to try and come up with what the numbers and explanations are for Karen's kit. And while I did get most of it correct on the first pass, the team has since updated the testing environment with the proper translations, numbers, and all that good stuff. So rather than have stuff that was simply not going to be fully accurate and just telling you it was not going to be accurate due to the testing environment, I have chosen at the 11th hour to re-record this entire guide from scratch with the updated translations and numbers. Now, just as a warning, this means I have now basically gone through two versions of Karen's entire kit, including the skill breakdowns, the tooltips, the explanations, all that stuff. I have rewritten the script and the notes to match the updated translations that we have to work with in the testing environment now, but if there is something that seems off or there is a number that is incorrect, it is almost certainly because I have crossed myself up and forgot to edit one of the older translations into the updated one on my notes and script. So if anything seems goofy, that is almost certainly why, and I do apologize in advance for that. If I missed anything on that front, I will do an updated comment that I will pin down in the comments section with any changes or addendums I need to add for, crossing up the two different translations of this particular testing environment we had to work with. So this is going to be probably a little messier than I would like my guide to be, but we had very, very limited time to work on this, and then finding out that what I had translated was not fully correct basically means I'm doing this from scratch right before the patch goes up, to be perfectly honest with you. So bear with me if there are some minor mistakes. I will do my best to avoid them, but this has not been the most ideal testing setup. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual part of the guide. We'll go over all the stuff you would expect. We'll talk about Karen's memory builds, her weapons, her cub, her evolutions, and of course we'll talk about the updated physical team compositions you can run with Karen available, and of course I'll do a full combat demonstration and breakdown of her kit, and then I will have sample rotations for various investment levels for you to take a look at. So with all that out of the way, and for me doing this on round 2, let's get right back into it, and we will start, as always, with the evolutions. I'm going to be using the skill evolution menu for this guide because it has the actual numbers and full translations. The main evolution breakdown has much less details on it, so I figure this is just going to be the best way to make sure I'm getting you proper information. So, at S5, whenever Karen enters her Ride the Rapid state, which is when she swaps from anchor to surfboard mode, or when she casts Surge Breach, which is her blue orb while in surfboard mode, or while using Boundless Deluge, which is her ultimate, she will activate all available QTEs. S5 standard remains as such. At double S, the effective piercing blow inflicted by Karen will be increased by 40%. As a reminder, physical characters get multiple types of shred, quote unquote. Piercing blow refers to the lessening of physical defense, not physical resistance, but physical defense. So this is going to increase by 40%. This should bring this to a grand total of 60% defense down on the physical side whenever Karen uses any skill that inflicts piercing blow. This is mostly tied to her Ride the Rapids form where she is using the surfboard. However, some of the skills with the anchor also will inflict the piercing blow type defense down. When Karen is on the field, triggering active matrix will continuously activate all available QTEs for the duration of hypermatrix deduction. As a reminder, hypermatrix deduction is the unique matrix to breakers where they're allowed to activate QTEs and extend the duration of that matrix by using QTEs depending on your evolution level. The base damage of Windrise Dawn and Death Hunt, these are skills that are used in her Ride the Rapids mode and are a key part of her rotations, are both up by 40%. When Karen leaves the field, she will trigger her QTE on the way out, which is a nice bonus to have because it will inflict all of her forms of shred. And then lastly, at double S, the base damage of her next ultimate increases the base amount of Tidal Force consumed when casting Surging Breach. Tidal Force is her base core passive. This I'll go over in the combat demonstration, of course, but basically you use tidal mark points, convert them to tidal force, and this increases the overall damage of her main skills while in Ride the Rapids mode and increases the damage on her ultimate depending on how many of these points you build up and then consume to do her final attack while in the Ride the Rapids mode. This can go up to a maximum of 60%, and this effect will reset after casting her ultimate and is removed when switched out. So basically, each time you use it and then swap Karen out, this bonus will be reapplied the next time she comes back on the field. At double S3, which is a pretty notable upgrade for Karen as it does enable a much easier double ult rotation within the amplifier window. Penetrating Pivot, which is the actual physical resistant shred, is up by 5%. This takes the base amount to a total of 25%. And the Infernal Finality, which is her Darkflow resistant shred, will increase by 10%. That takes that to a grand total of 30%. When Karen is on the team, all team members can extend the duration of Hypermatrix by 1 second while using a QTE while it's active. All our breakers so far have had this skill, so you use a QTE while Hypermatrix is active, it will stay active for 1 second longer, and this can stack the more QTEs you use. Surge Breach, which again is one of her key skills while in Ride the Rapids modes, damage is up by 40%. Karen will gain 50 Tide Mark, which is her initial core passive gauge each time she is swapped in, as well as gaining an additional 12 signature energy on the first Surge Breach cast. So the first time she uses her skill in Ride the Rapids, she will gain some extra signature energy. This just smooths out her rotation. And then lastly, at double S3, on each switch in, Karen will gain 100 Tide Mark points after the first Boundless Deluge cast. So after you use your first ultimate, you get a free 100 Tide Mark points. You need 100 of these to activate Ride the Rapids mode. So this is effectively a free trip back into her main damage form after you use your first ultimate. When entering Ride the Rapids within 5 seconds after using the ultimate, Karen will automatically consume 3 signal orbs and gain 36 signature energy. This just makes it so she can ult quicker on her second round within the rotation. At triple S, which is unfortunately a very, very powerful upgrade as it is for all tank and breaker classes, but nonetheless, Penetrating Pivot, which is the physical resistant shred, is up by another 10%. This takes it to a grand total of 35%, and Infernal Finality goes up another 10% for a grand total of 40 on the Darkflow shred. While Karen is on the team, all members can store their QTEs up to a maximum of 2 charges. Same effect we've seen on Kamui and Rosetta prior. You're allowed to hold on to your QTEs and build up charges to use them. This gets even more silly if you're using Da Vinci, especially the 6-set version. So Another powerful upgrade at SSS. All character swap cooldowns are decreased by 3 seconds. This is the same for all tanks since the 3rd generation. Very powerful to have. Obviously, gets your rotations moving quicker and makes the amplifier window that much more valuable. After each swap in, once the 5th hit of Windrise Dawn is used, this is her spam basic attack while in Ride the Rapids mode. You will be using it very often regardless of your investment level. But at SSS, the next Surge Breach will gain time lag calculation, aka time stop. This is very important because it makes getting 2 ultimates within the amplifier window much less tight and much more reliable to do for Karen. Unfortunately, it being a SSS passive means not a lot of players are going to have access to it, but it is a very powerful upgrade. And lastly, at SSS, if 100 Tide Marks are consumed while casting Surge Breach, Karen will gain an extra 50 Tidal Force and increase the base damage of the Surge Breach skill by 32%. So, bonus core passive gauge for using the conversion, and you get a damage up on one of the skills you will be using quite often during Karen's rotations. At SS3, the extra damage bonus of Surge Breach is up by 64%. At SS6, the extra damage bonus of Death Hunt and Windrise Dawn, which are her tap basic and hold basic skills in Ride the Rapids mode, is increased by 70%. And lastly, at SSS Plus for the full whale breakdown, the extra damage of her ultimate increases by 32%, and the extra damage bonus of the AoE field it leaves behind that will induce physical shred and all that good stuff is also up by 32%. So pretty powerful SSS Plus for those of you who are going to ball her out in your wallet for Karen. With the evolutions out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about potential memory builds for Karen. So, the main memory build that I think is going to suit most of you if you just want to do one set and be done with it, set it and forget it moving forward, especially if you are going to be running the meta team moving forward, is going to be 4-piece of her signature set, Santiago. This has all sorts of massive bonuses for Karen's kit, including things that you will be using regularly throughout her rotations. And then for the secondary 4-piece set, harmonizing on her 6-star weapon, will be 4-piece Patton. Patton is the base physical shred set. It is very powerful. We want it somewhere on the physical team, and since for a lot of people Han Ying will be the character that gets replaced, she was carrying Patton prior, so Karen makes the most sense to take this set on now as she takes over tanking duties. If you are going to be running a team with a double tank setup and using Han Ying instead of Selena, or if you are unable to get Karen's 6-star weapon right now, I would recommend swapping Patton out for 2-piece Kadi if you do not have access to harmonization. Karen is very based around her ultimate for a lot of her damage, so Kadi works perfectly fine and is another option for a base memory set as well, which I'll go over here in a second. As for your weapon resonances, these are going to be the same no matter what memory set I recommend for you, but on the bottom we want 6 signature. Again, a lot of her damage is tied to her signature. It is the key part of her kit. No reason to do anything else. She has more than enough shred built into her base kit, her weapon, and everything else that using the tank class skill is notably less effective than just going full signature on the bottom. On the top, since Karen is a physical unit, you will want to do attack 15, crit 15 in all 6 slots. Do note that the crit 15 bonus is not massive, even with 6 of them. It is fairly minuscule in the grand scheme. If you don't have a lot of shot points or you are not willing to re-roll over and over again, say you don't have a bunch of memory pick resonances available, feel free to just use any 15 attack and re-roll these over time into the crit bonus. It does help, but it's not going to brick the character if you don't have all 6 of these on attack 15, crit 15 moving forward. The secondary option, as mentioned, will be running Kadi in place of Patton, so both on the bottom memory slots and then on the weapon, harmonizing over to Kadi instead. This is going to be the main memory set I would recommend if you are going to be either A, running the double tank setup with Han Ying, or if you are doing short burst fights like Pain Cage. This is likely going to be a slightly faster clear for Karen, something to consider down the road if you plan on doing that for having her carrying Pain Cage, which for most physical bosses, I am fairly confident Karen is going to be the main nuker of those moving forward. So if you are able to build both of these sets, it's very much worth doing. But if you just are only in the market for one right now, I would recommend Patton over Cotty for most situations. But both of these sets will serve her just fine as long as Patton is somewhere on the physical team when you are running Karen. Same memory resonances apply, 6 ultimate on the bottom, 6 attack 15, crit 15 up top. So I'm going to swap this back on before I forget so I can re-record the combat demonstration later. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about her weapons, as I need to swap this Harmony back over anyway. So, Karen's 6-star weapon is incredibly powerful. In addition to just getting bonus attack and all that, this does a lot. It increases the piercing strike effect, which is the physical defense shred, or physical resistance shred, excuse me, including other things like boosting surge breach and getting her extra signal orbs. This is a very, very, very powerful signature weapon. However, if you cannot afford to get the weapon right now, I will have a rotation that will work fine with her 5-star weapon. You will see a notable dip in performance without it, especially with the lack of harmonization, but she can function without her weapon. You're just going to have to make some compromises, and you're going to have to basically resign yourself to single ult rotations until you can get a hold of the weapon. The good news is that Karen is not a limited Philo tree character, therefore her weapon will always be available in the target weapon banner at an 80% rate up. So if you can't roll it right now, you need to save for future characters or future pulls. Feel free to get this down the road when you're able to get some more weapon tickets or whatnot. As for weapon resonances, this saved the wrong one again. I've done this twice now. First and foremost, Domain Deconstruction is, of course, the premier tank weapon resonance. It's just extra shred. It's incredibly good in all situations. Highly recommended as your main resonance. I do not recommend Glorious Afterglow on Karen for a damage resonance. She does not ping signal orbs all that often. She is actually a notable polar opposite to Kamui. While Kamui burns through orbs like crazy and regenerates them like crazy, Karen is much more centered around her basic attacks and those skills that are tied to them as she compared to what she is with orbs. So Glorious Afterglow does not perform very well on the character. If you're going to go for multiple resonances, I recommend Matrix Lightning. Hyper Matrix Deduction can last for a very long time, especially if you're double S3 or higher. And if you have a full 3-tap, I would slap Incandescence on. Deadline timing, as far as through my testing, has no need whatsoever. There may be a niche use for deadline timing down the road, possibly for the Darkflow team or something else, but for the base physical kit, she is never in danger of really running out of orbs, regardless of your investment level, so deadline timing can be pretty easily skipped on this character overall. That out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at Karen's cub. It is a starfish, and its name is Patrick. Very clever, Kuro. Very clever. Nonetheless, Patrick's pretty strong. The unique character skill on this cub is quite good. Whenever she uses Surging Breach, she's going to get a bunch of bonus damage. You will be using this throughout most rotations fairly regularly, regardless of investment. And more importantly, while she is in Ride the Rapid state, aka using the surfboard, she just gets a flat 20% attack bonus for 8 seconds, and it resets every time you go back into Ride the Rapids mode. So this is effectively almost a full uptime 20% attack bonus when you have the cub on. It is quite good to have. If you can afford the cub at all, it is not limited either, but right now, since it is the newest cub, it is on 100% rate up. I would recommend picking up this cub if you can at all afford it. The active skill has grouping on the default choice, so I would recommend just leaving this alone and not altering it, as grouping is always going to be more beneficial on your cub than a little bit of extra damage, but feel free to mess around with the active skills if you like to experiment with the cubs, but grouping on the main skill is always a welcome thing to have. Again, very strong cub, very recommended if you have the extra cub tickets, but if you can't afford it, it will be available at the 80% rate up throughout the rest of the game, since she is not Philo tree limited. Thank you very much, Kuro, on that front. So, with all of her equipment out of the way, what are my pull and investment recommendations for Karen? So, base level, of course, get her to double S, one copy out of the gacha, and then getting her 30 shards out of the Pain Cage shop to evolve her to double S. Just like most characters, double S is basically what you need to have the character be functioning with their base level kit. After that, I would highly recommend the 6-star weapon. It has way too many bonuses and a massive amount of defense shred. It smooths over her rotations a great deal, and you will see a notable uptick in damage going from the 5-star weapon to the 6-star weapon. Once you have those two things knocked out, it's kind of a toss-up. If you have a bunch of extra Cub tickets, and you don't have tickets that could be used to roll another copy of Karen, I definitely recommend go ahead and getting the Cub. However, if you would have to use black cards that could get you to double S3 instead, I would say getting that second copy out of the gacha is going to give you more overall value than the Cub will. So if you can only choose one, I would slightly recommend double S3 over the Cub. But if you have Cub tickets that are just going to sit there and burn a hole in your pocket anyway, go ahead and get the Cub and move on to higher evolutions from there. Triple S is, of course, a very powerful evolution for all tank-based classes. Karen is no different. If you have the means to get there, she will perform quite silly numbers because that's what breakers do. Although I will say Karen does feel a little bit more reined in and reasonable compared to Kamui. I think she's still going to be one of the highest damage characters in the game, but she can't quite spam ultimates at the level Kamui can. So just something to consider there. Nonetheless, Triple S is very strong. Beyond that, you're a whale and you don't need my advice in the first place, nor would you listen to it even if I offered it. But those act as my pull and investment recommendations. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the updated physical team compositions moving forward. So, hop over to the trial mode here. So, the meta team moving forward, if and only if you have Selena at double S3 with her signature weapon and you have harmonized it to level 2, then you will want to replace Mama Han Ying with Karen and run the physical team as it is moving forward. So the setup for this team, if you are running Selena, is going to be Karen with her 4-piece signature and 4-piece pattern. She will act as the leader, which again, it didn't save. This test environment has given me a few gray hairs that I don't have because I'm already bald. That's the only upside there. Moving on. Nonetheless, Selena sticks to her same setup. 4-piece Mirana, 4-piece Kadi. As for your resonances on Selena, they do not change. Core passive on the bottom, 15 attack, 15 crit up top. If you have been running Selena's base kit prior, nothing really changes with it moving forward. As for her weapon resonances, she no longer needs deadline timing thanks to the upgrade on her harmonization. So you can go with full damage resonances if you have them available for her. So Glorious Afterglow, Lightning, and Incandescence in that order is what I would recommend if you are doing weapon resonances on Selena. Veronica will run her same support amplifier set, acting with 4-piece Da Vinci, 2-piece of her signature set Keats, and 2-piece Philip. As for weapon resonances on her, let me do memory resonances. Pretty straightforward. Amplifier class skill on the bottom for all 6. 15 attack, 15 crit up top. Veronica will still see a brief amount of field time even on the meta team composition, so making sure you have her proper damage resonances is still worth doing, but she will mostly be acting as the team buffer and basically giving the amplifier bonus is her main purpose going forward. As for resonances, the amplifier ones first and foremost, Glorious Spear and then Axial Ray. If you go for a full 3-tap, you can use Matrix Lightning or Incandescence. I slightly prefer Matrix Lightning since Veronica triggers Matrix very close to her ultimate, and this is very helpful for overall damage. Again, she's going to be doing far and away the least amount of damage on the team moving forward, but still a little bit extra if you have her weapon completely kitted out. If you are going to be running a different setup, let's say you do not have Selena at double S3 with her signature weapon harmonized to level 2, then from there I would recommend running a double tank build with Han Ying and Karen on the team and not running Selena moving forward. For this setup, what we're going to do is we're going to keep Han Ying on her 4-piece signature set and 4-piece pattern. For her resonances, she keeps the class tank skill on the bottom and 15 attack, 15 crit up top. And with that, since she is already running pattern, we can go ahead and run 4-piece Sig, 4-piece Kadi on Karenina instead. Same weapon resonances and everything apply to all of her build. You just do Kadi instead of Patton. Weapon resonances for Han Ying Domain Deconstruction, might as well have it. It won't stack or anything with the Breaker version, but when she's doing damage, it's just extra shred. After that, Matrix Lightning and Incandescence are perfectly fine. Han Ying no longer needs deadline timing either, so it can be omitted. And Veronica can keep the exact same setup that is on the metaphysical team. She does not change anything. You're just going to be running 2 tanks instead of running Selena as the secondary DPS and attacker. If you are in a situation where, let's say, your Karenina is below triple S, your Han Ying is triple S or higher, and your Selena is maybe double S3 with the weapon, it might be a bit closer of a toss-up for what is going to perform better in long runs, aka Warzone. Having the swap cooldown is very, very valuable on this team, as it is with any team, so you might have to do some testing if you are running the bare minimum Selena that runs in the meta team, but you have a very kitted out Han Ying. If you've taken Han Ying all the way up to triple S plus with free vouchers and stuff, now that she's been a free character for a little bit, then she is still very powerful. She can still function quite well on this team, but it's going to take some extra testing to figure out what is the better option if you have both Selena and Han Ying as an option. Once Selena is triple S or higher, she is absolutely going to be the better option. It's not close once you get to that point. But because Selena is such a high demand investment to make the metaphysical team run, if you want to run Han Ying instead, it's going to be a little bit cheaper since she is technically a free character now. Mix and match depending on what suits your account at its current level. Lastly, for some budget options, if you lack either Han Ying or Selena, you can run Alyssa Echo as the amplifier for the physical team. If you do run her, I recommend running 4-piece Signa, which is her signature set. This has crit bonuses on it and will help buff the overall damage of the team. And then if you have her weapon harmonized, which you probably should if you have Alyssa, since she was the original harmonization character, you can run 2-piece Guinevere, 2-piece Philip for the 2 different bonuses to overall damage and physical performance. If you are lacking Han Ying as a tank and do not have an invested Selena, you can run old Rosetta as a buffing bot. Just have her run 4-piece Da Vinci, 2-piece Catherine for buffs for the team. She will not see much field time or do anything of use. She will just be there to make things function as a budget fill-in. If you are lacking either of these characters, just run your best physical tank, even if it's an A rank. If you do not have any A rank tanks built, just run the best physical attacker or option you can find. And if you don't have Alyssa available, just run your best built amplifier and just run off the base amplifier bonus. You'll have to omit the physical buffs, but that's the price you pay for running a budget team, unfortunately. Do note that Ishmael is not an option for replacing any of these characters on the physical team, due to the fact that Ishmael's observer abilities will not work with Karen as the team as a tank, since you already have one, and she will not function well as a physical amplifier, because the nature of physical amplifiers is the big thing they do for the team is give crit buffs, and Ishmael's kit cannot do that even if she is observing. So do not recommend running Ishmael in any format on the physical team. If this is your first time building a new physical unit, yes, physical is a big pain. It is one of the most demanding elements in the game, including the elemental effects, because of its unique ability to crit. But with all of that covered, those are your potential team loadouts. This should cover basically any situation you will run into with Karen. And with all that covered, let's go ahead, get over to the training mode, and I will go through Karen's kit and show you how she works on the field. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Karenina's physical base kit. So Karenina has a lot of moving parts, and if you read through her skill tooltips, if you do it twice like I did, once to translate it and once to read it again, it looks like there's a whole lot of stuff going on that's going to be a lot to parse. At the end of the day, Karen is pretty simple to play, and a lot of her moving parts are kind of superfluous. You don't need a lot of this character's kit to have her do the things that make her effective in combat. Nonetheless, just like all my guides, I want to go over every every piece of the kit so you understand how everything works, why things flow together the way they do, and this gives context for the style of rotations I'm going to share with you once we get into that section next. But we'll start with the bare bones basics. Karen's basic attack string, very straightforward. She does a lot with the anchor. There is not a lot of reason to use the anchor basic attack. Anchor mode is effectively her base mode. However, it is a mode you're also going to want to get out of as soon as possible because the vast majority of Karen's damage, her shred and all of that stuff is done in the Ride the Rapids mode while she has the surfboard out. But let's go through base mode in totality first. So the basic attack exists. She also has a hold basic where she will charge up the anchor. Once it flashes, you can release the basic and then do another basic attack at the end of it for a slam down. If you have orbs available, this will consume some red orbs and build up your core passive gauge in the process. This is another way to get her core passive online. However, it is much slower and much less efficient than just using orbs outright. So it's not something you're going to be doing regularly in most combat situations. That said, if you are running Karen at very low investment, let's say 5-star weapon and double S, there may be times where you need to build up core passive gauge and don't have quite as many orbs as you would like. This is slightly more orb efficient. It's just a much slower animation to build up her core passive gauge. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about the core passive gauge and talk about Karen's various modes, and we'll go through the orbs in each. So as mentioned, Anchor is her base mode. In Anchor mode, I believe it's referred to as Anchor Trace in the tooltip. You only have access to her red orbs, and then the yellow orb is a static orb. Unlike a lot of the characters we've had recently, Karen's static orb is actually not something you really need to use basically ever for her main rotations, but let's go through what they do. The red orb itself is a combo based orb, and I'm actually going to reset so you can see that it fills the core passive gauge, but the red orb can be comboed into, so you do 1 3-ping, you can do a second 3-ping where she will pull the enemy back in and pull them to her. This also works by doing a red ping into the yellow static orb. It will also work this way. If there are orbs available to be pinged, using the yellow orb as a combo orb will ping more of the red orbs available, and this will fill her core passive gauge. The anchor icon down here is Karen's title mark points. We want to build up title mark points to maximum. This gauge goes from 0 to 100. Once it has 100, that is how many she needs to enter the Ride the Rapids mode, and that's where the bulk of this combat demonstration is going to go. But let's continue talking about stuff in here before we get to that. So multiple ways to build the core passive gauge: using the red combo orbs, using the hold basic into the slam down. If you have orbs available, we'll also do it. But either way, your main goal whenever you are in Anchor Trace mode is to get into her Ride the Rapids mode as soon as possible, and you do that by building up a full core passive gauge. So if you are below double S3, you will start with 0 core passive gauge online. So this will not be half full. At double S3 is where you get the bonus of 50 tide mark points out the gate just for Karen coming on the field. So if you're playing a double S Karen, you're going to have to use 2 red 3-pings to fill this up, or multiple instances of the hold basic into the slam attack. Before we get into the rest of the core passive and swapping modes and all that, the yellow orb can be used whenever it acts as a pull-in move. So if an enemy is small or lightweight, it will be pulled to Karen anytime you use this mode, and it has its own unique cooldown. If the enemy is very large or too heavy, instead of pulling the enemy in, Karen will pull herself to the enemy. So if there are any future modes, Trial of Simulacrum, Babel Tower, anything where you're doing some stylish things, this is a way to get some extra movement and do some stylish combos if you want. Otherwise, for the most part, you can basically ignore the fact that Karen even has a static yellow orb. For her rotations and stuff that I have parsed out and what I'm going to be showing you today, I basically never touch this button, but it does exist. It exists in all her modes, and it does have some fringe uses. Possibly might be more important when we get to the Darkflow stuff, but for the physical aspect of playing Karen, you can almost flat out ignore this, and it's not going to be to your detriment. So Let's talk about what her other modes look like. So outside of Ride the Rapids mode, Karen has another mode with her surfboard called Ferry mode. This can be gotten into by holding a direction and dodging twice. This will have Karen hop on the surfboard, but this is not considered Ride the Rapids. She does not have the Ride the Rapids buffs or any of the unique shred or anything that comes with it. She simply swaps over to the surfboard and gains extra movement and gains access to her blue orb. If you stop moving, Karen will hop off the surfboard and go back into anchor mode. And if you do certain things like hit basic attack, this will also cause her to go back into anchor trace mode. So, as far as I can tell, I have found no practical use whatsoever for Fairy mode. You can build up her core passive this way and use her blue orbs to get yourself more core passive gauge. You can also spam the yellow orb to just spam these shots nonstop when you are in this mode. But for the most part, Fairy mode is not an efficient way to get things built up the way we want to utilize her core passive and to get her ultimate online. So right now, again, maybe down the road this is going to have some kind of use, but Fairy mode, as far as I can tell, is much more about style and panache than it is any kind of practical use on the character. So just something to keep in mind, but do know you can enter this mode at any time. You do not need to have a set amount of core passive gauge built up, and you can go into it whenever. But again, stopping moving ends the mode, hitting basic ends the mode, and then there's another way to get into Ride the Rapids that we'll talk about here shortly. So once we have a full core passive gauge and we've maxed out our title mark points, you will see that Karen's dodge is glowing with a nice aura around it. The way Karen activates Ride the Rapids is by holding down the dodge button. And this takes, if you want to do this, you need 100 title mark points built up. So just a full anchor core passive activates this and brings it online. So if we hold down dodge, Karen will trigger Hyper Matrix, and we will go into Ride the Rapids mode. If you do anything like tap forward or do various certain moves with the anchor or other things, you will exit the mode. You're going to want to be very careful with what inputs you're utilizing when you're in Ride the Rapids. But the good thing is, if you accidentally exit the mode, you don't just lose the core passive gauge. So if I go into Ride the Rapids and I'm moving around on the surfboard and then I stop moving, you'll notice the core passive gauge doesn't get deleted in the process. We just go back to anchor trace mode. So in Ride the Rapids mode, there are a few things to talk about. So if we go ahead, hold dodge, you will see the core passive gauge changes to her surfboard icon. So this effectively is working exactly the same way. However, she has more title mark points built up. She can go to a grand total of 300, if I remember correctly. Basically, what the core passive is used for is we are going to do certain attacks that will drain the core passive gauge and convert them into title force stacks. That is the number that is in the middle of her core passive gauge. This can go to a maximum of 500. The higher number of title force stacks we have, the more damage Karen's ultimate will use, as well as her final plunge attack by holding basic in Ride the Rapids mode. So there are two ways to utilize the core passive gauge in this mode. One, the main one you're going to be using a lot of the time is if you start spamming basic attack, you will see Karen goes into attack sequence that utilizes all of the core passive gauge and converts everything into the title force mode. You will note now, because I've used the core passive gauge, I can't just go right back into Ride the Rapids. I have to rebuild up my title mark points to be able to re-enter that. So I'm doing this for demonstration, obviously, but the idea is you build up your title force stacks. You're going to use those, cash those out, and then use her ultimate. But let's get back in just so I can show you. So we go back into Ride the Rapids. Once you have maxed out stacks sometime sooner, if you hold basic, Karen will go into a plunge attack that will spend all of the title force stacks available. This will give you a boatload of signature energy and will cause the various buffs she has at different evolution passives to buff the overall damage on her ultimate. Let's see here. Let's just do the ultimate so you can take a look what it looks like. The ultimate works regardless of what mode you are in. Nothing really changes on that front. She does the cinematic, does the final anchor plunge, and then you will see the AoE field she leaves behind does constant damage, which will inflict the breaker shred, and will trigger any passives off field when Karen leaves the field and your next attacker comes on. So let's go ahead and take a look back in Ride the Rapids. So your other main use in Ride the Rapids mode is going to be when you have at least, I believe it's 100 title mark points again. You can spin them all on the blue orb to cash out this a little bit quicker instead of the spam basic. So if I tap blue orb, Karen does a single attack, and now you will see we build up 300 points, and that is going to be enough to initiate the big hold basic plunge attack and get her ultimate online. So let me reset so we're starting from scratch and this makes a little more sense. But the general flow of gameplay for Karen is that you build up core passive to get into Ride the Rapids mode, cash out your core passive to turn it into Tidal Force, use the Tidal Force on her hold basic mode in Ride the Rapids. This will give you signature energy and you can cast her ultimate. And depending on your investment level, you may go for another rotation, or if you're at lower investment, double S without her signature weapon, for example, that would be all you would do. You would swap Karen off the field afterwards. So I'm going to use a single 3-ping and then immediately hold dodge, and we're in Ride the Rapids mode. So if I spam these core passive basics and then hold basic at the end, the plunge comes down, and you will build up just enough signature to get things online if you're doing things properly. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in practice. So Karen comes in, we use a 3-ping, we hold dodge, we spam all the core passive, get our ultimate online, and as soon as that plunge hits, the moment the final anchor hits the ground, as Karen comes down, you can cancel that animation into her ultimate. After her ultimate, she will always go back to base anchor trace mode, and you will start over from where we began at the beginning. Do note, once you get to higher evolutions, notably double S3, you will get a free full core passive gauge for using your ultimate one time when Karen comes on the field. So at double S3, this means you don't have to spend any red orbs, yellow orbs, or anything else to go back into Ride the Rapids. You can immediately do so by holding dodge after the ultimate ends. Same thing applies. Now that we've done that, we can use the blue orb, go into the plunge attack, and depending on where you're at in a rotation and how things work, this is another way to get enough signature energy and get a second ultimate off, and I'll go over all of those potential outlooks once we go through the various rotations at the varying investments. But the general rule of thumb is the first thing you want to do the first time you run through a rotation is go through that entire basic attack string. So get to your core passive, go into Ride the Rapids, and you want to expend all of this core passive to get to 500 stacks. Getting to 500 stacks is a notable boost to the overall damage on her ultimate. It also sets up future things with the amount of signature energy it builds and makes future rotations go quicker. This is kind of the baseline route of how to play Karen. If you are playing her at much lower investment, that is pretty much the string you're always going to use to get to her ultimate. And then again, you can cast the ultimate in any form, but ideally you are canceling out the hold basic attack in Ride the Rapids mode and then going back into base mode from there. So that, for the most part, is basically everything that really matters on Karen's kit. I should note that there are some specifics to keep track of. Again, as I mentioned during the evolution passives, most of Karen's shred when she is on the field comes from Ride the Rapids mode. She will not do near as much shred and defense lowering on the physical defense and resistances in base mode as she will in Ride the Rapids mode. That is where most of her oomph is. So the general idea is if you're not in Ride the Rapids mode, your goal should be get in Ride the Rapids mode. That's basically the long and the short of it. So once you get this down, this is pretty much what Karen does. She is very, very centered around her basic attacks, especially in Ride the Rapids mode. This is why I mentioned that you really do not need to worry about deadline timing or orb economy on this character, because so much of her kit is tied around using maybe a single 3-ping, and the rest of it is going to be basic attacks. So this varies from investment level to investment level based on the rotations, and I have 4 of them to show you in the rotation section. But this pretty much covers everything of note you need to know about how to play Karen. If you're not in surf mode, get yourself into surf mode. Once you're here, spam basic attack or use a blue orb to get yourself some Tidal Force stacks. Spend the stacks on the hold basic plunge, and this will get you to your ultimate. Repeat from there. So again, lots of moving parts, but a lot of them aren't that important, and Karen is very easy to pilot, other than the fact that because she does have pretty lengthy animations, even at higher investments, fitting in 2 ultimates within the amplifier window can get somewhat tricky and will demand a little bit of execution on your part, but it's nothing that's going to be mind-breaking or anything like that. So, with the base combat kit displayed and out of the way, let's go ahead, hop over to the rotations I've recorded, and we'll go through each of those, and that'll help kind of fill in the gaps for everything of why we're doing what we're doing with her kit. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through some rotation options for Karenina on the physical team. So, same disclaimer I give in all my videos, I am not guaranteeing you these are the absolute best, most optimized rotations for each investment level. Characters always evolve, little nuances are found over time, but these should be very close to what will be somewhat meta rotations and will get you going in Warzone and Pain Cage very quickly out the gate. So I'm going to have 4 different rotations for you. One at SS without the 5-star or without the 6-star weapon, so a budget rotation. One at SS with the weapon, and then one each for SS3 and SSS and above. So there's going to be a lot of overlap in these rotations, but there are small nuances between them. And as always, the goal here is to kind of explain to you why we're doing what we're doing and how it all flows together and utilizes Karen's resources to get through ultimates and get a rotation online and keeping the team moving. So this first one here, we're going to talk about SS, no 6-star weapon available. So this will be your budget rotation. Pretty simple and straightforward. When you do not have the 6-star weapon, Karen does not have the orb economy to do multiple ult rotations. So it's going to be get her on the field, do a max damage ultimate, and get her off the field. So let's go through and see what that looks like. So right off the gate, since we're SS and no weapon, we come on the field with no core passive gauge to our name. So we're going to have to manually do that. One thing I want to note here real quick, and I'll try and frame by frame this. Karen's bring in animation doesn't really do anything of value for her. It does not build the core passive gauge. It doesn't do anything of note. So there's no real reason to let it play out. So every single rotation, no matter your investment level, you're going to start by swapping Karen on the field and immediately hitting dodge to cancel this animation. This becomes more important at especially SS3, where the timing to get 2 ults in a single amplifier window is much tighter. But early on, this is just to make things a little bit smoother and to get the rotations going a little bit faster so you can cycle through your team more regularly. So every single rotation will start the same way. Swap Karen in, tap dodge to cancel out the animation, and then from here we need to build our core passive gauge. So for SS without the weapon available, what I like to do is do red 3 ping and then dodge cancel that and do another red 3 ping. You can do the combo orb. It doesn't really matter. There's not a massive difference in animation from my testing, but I did find it's ever so slightly quicker to try and dodge cancel the 2 red 3 pings, but just do whatever is comfortable for you. Especially at this level, you're not going to miss out on the amplifier window. It's not a big deal. So, but moving forward, after we build our core passive gauge, we immediately hold dodge to go into ride the rapids mode. You saw this in the combat demonstration. This is going to be the MO for every rotation, is get into ride the rapids mode as quickly as possible. So from here, what we're going to do is start spamming our basic attack. You will need to spam 5 of these in a row. You can time them. I just mash it out because I'm a filthy Guilty Gear player and I've gotten really good at just mashing buttons and knowing when it's time to confirm the rest. Whatever is comfortable for you, but we'll take a total of 5 basic attacks to drain the core passive gauge and build up our 500 Tidal Force stacks. After you see the 500 hit, and as soon as you see this animation where Karen is whipping around the surfboard with the chain, you can start holding down basic. You'll see on my input down here, I'm already holding it down. That will cause her to go into the plunge attack, which will build up the rest of our signature energy and get the ultimate online. So as soon as the plunge hits, tap ultimate for the ultimate to go off. And then before we swap Karen off the field, and this is going to be true for basically every single rotation, regardless of investment, you're going to want to spend 1 3-ping before you swap her off the field. The reason for this is no matter how many orbs you have left, even if this takes you down to 0, Karen has a unique passive once you get to double S. Actually, I don't even think it is double S. I think it's just built into her core kit, if I recall properly. But either way, Karen has a passive that when you swap her off the field, if she has less than 3 signal orbs, she is automatically refilled up to 3. So if you take her off the field with 0 orbs, she actually already has 3. This does not affect anything involving deadline timing, although she doesn't need DLT. But it doesn't impact any other orb generation. She just gets a free restock up to 3 orbs no matter what her orb count is if she's less than 3 when leaving the field. So even at this low rank, you're going to want to go ahead and tap that 3-ping on the way out. What this is going to do is for future rotations, it'll make it so you only have to burn 1 3-ping to get your core passive online. Again, this isn't going to make the amplifier window change or anything. It's not going to cause you to get it in the window instead of not having it, but it's just a way to speed up future rotations. But at double S without the signature weapon, you're just doing 1 ult and getting off the field. For the future rotations, you'll have to do 1 less 3-ping when you bring her on the field, and then you'll just repeat from there. So pretty simple and straightforward double S rotation without the signature weapon. I don't think there's a lot else to talk about here. So let's go ahead and go through it in order. I will annotate with my voice and have the text off the side so you can practice, but this is double S Karen without her signature weapon. Swap in, dodge, 2 red 3-pings, hold dodge. 5 basic attacks in a row, hold basic. Plunge attack, ultimate as the plunge hits. After the ultimate, red 3-ping, swap Karen out, move to your next attacker. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and move on to a double S rotation with the signature weapon. Okay, so for the double S rotation, once you have Karen's 6-star weapon available, the nice thing is that with the signature weapon, Karen now has enough orb economy to do double ult rotations. You will never get 2 ultimates at double S within the amplifier window, no matter what you do. She does not have the passives that facilitate that. However, I'm going to go ahead and do a double ult rotation at double S because I feel that since Karen is a breaker and her damage is going to be so torqued compared to the other physical characters, that it is worth doing a double ult rotation even though you're only getting 1 within the within the amplifier window. This may differ for your team if you have a particularly high invested, let's say Selena or Han Ying. If you have a triple S or even higher Selena with her signature weapon and Harmony level 2, you may just want to do single ult rotations with Karen to keep the line moving and get back to Selena more often. That's something you'll have to judge for yourself, but I'm operating on the idea that if you're stopping at double S, you're probably not sitting on a triple S Selena. So if that is a situation that's unique to you, if Selena's your waifu and you pimped her out when you first got her, then by all means feel free to tone this down to a single ult rotation, but with the signature weapon, we now have the orb economy to go ahead and do double ult rotations. So this is going to look very similar to how it did in the one without the signature weapon. We'll bring Karen in, immediately dodge to cancel out of the bring in animation, and then do 2 red 3-pings or red 3-ping dodge red 3-ping. Either works, whichever you feel is more comfortable. From here, hold dodge to get into ride the rapids mode, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Spam 5 basics, hold the basic attack for the plunge, cancel the plunge into the ultimate. As we come out of the ultimate, we will have to rebuild our core passive gauge. So yet again, 2 red 3-pings or red 3-ping dodge, red 3-ping, whatever is more comfortable. After that, with the full core passive gauge, hold dodge again, and we will spam 5 more basics. Hold down the plunge, cancel the plunge into the ultimate. And then after the second ultimate, before we swap Karen off the field, burn a red 3-ping and then swap to your next attacker. This again will make it so that for the rest of the fight, when you bring Karen back on the field, you'll only need a single red 3-ping to max out the core passive gauge and get into ride the rapids mode. It's just a way to kind of make things more efficient for every rotation after the first one. So let's go ahead. This will be Karenina double S with her signature weapon double ultimate rotation. Swap in, dodge, 2 red 3 pings, hold dodge, 5 basic attacks. Hold down basic, cancel the plunge into the ultimate. Out of the ultimate, 2 red 3 pings, hold dodge, 5 basics again. Hold down basic, cancel the plunge into the ultimate. After the ultimate, red 3 ping, swap to your next attacker. There's your Karenina SS with her signature weapon. Let's move on to SS3 with the signature weapon. Alright, so once Karenina reaches SS3, she gets some passives that enable her to get more efficient rotations going. This is also going to enable her to, after the first rotation, be able to do both ultimates within the amplifier window. Now, I'm going to note this is very, very tight. You have to be on point with every input if you want to get double ultimate rotations within the amplifier window after the first set of rotations. Your first rotation, no matter what you do, you will not get the 2 ults within the amplifier window. She does not have quite enough of the passive bonuses that enable that like it does once you hit SS, but after your first rotation, every rotation thereafter, both ultimates can be fit within the amplifier window. So let's go ahead and talk about what's different and break down why we're doing what we're doing. So now that we are SS3, we come on the field with a half full core passive gauge. This means now, instead of doing dodge into 2 red 3 pings, we can now do dodge red 3 ping and go from there with a full core passive gauge. I talk for a living. Anyway, red 3 ping, then we go ahead, hold down dodge to go into ride the rapids mode. Since we can't fit both ultimates within the amplifier window, we're going to want the bigger ultimate to happen first. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and do the 5 basics for the maximum amount of Tidal Force stacks. Hold down the basic and do the ultimate because this one will go off before the amplifier window ends. After this, now, since we are at SS3, once we use the ultimate, we come back with a full core passive gauge. We don't need to spend any more red orbs to keep the train moving here, so we can go ahead out of the ultimate, immediately hold down dodge to go back into ride the rapids mode. And since we can't fit this within the amplifier window for our second ultimate, what we're going to do is kind of go halfway. We're not going to do the full set of basics and go way past the amplifier window. What we're instead going to do is use a single blue 3 ping to build up a decent amount of the Tidal Force stacks, but still get the ultimate off in a much quicker time. Because as you can see, right now, there's just not enough window for us to get back to the next ultimate. So once we go into ride the rapids for the second time, you do a single blue 3 ping, and then from here, you have enough stacks built up, you can go ahead and start holding down basic for the plunge attack. So it's just enter ride the rapids. We don't have to build anything up since we get the free core passive gauge. Use a blue 3 ping to get our 300 stacks and immediately go into the plunge. So from the plunge, we go ahead, use our ultimate. And then after the ultimate, same as the other ones, we're going to go ahead and burn a red 3 ping. This gets us half our core passive gauge before we swap to our next attacker. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go through the rotations with the other 2 characters. I did this just for my own timing purposes, but I'm going to speed stuff up. Whatever your rotation is for your Selena and your Veronica, respectively, depending on their investment levels, or if you are using the double tank setup with Han Ying, do your rotations within this window and then get back to Karen as soon as she is off cooldown. So this is just the route I went. Yours may vary depending on your investment levels and what you have for, swap cooldown and all that good stuff. But I'm not going to go through the actual other characters because otherwise we're going to have 5 pages of annotations and y'all don't need that. So after the other 2 characters do their rotations and Karen is coming back offline, pretty straightforward. How we're going to fit the double amplifier window in, again, is going to be very, very tightly timed. All of this is going to have to be done basically as quickly as you can possibly get the input to be read. Otherwise, your second ultimate will fall short of the amplifier window. So we come back on the field. We already have half our core passive gauge thanks to the 3 ping we used on the way out off the field. So we come in, we immediately dodge cancel the animation of the bring in so we can tap a red 3 ping. This gets us to our full core passive gauge and we immediately hold dodge. From here, we want to build up our big ultimate, so we're going to do the 5 basics into hold basic, into the plunge. Ultimate goes off. Now, the nice part is since we have built up the extra signature energy and we have the double S3 passive, one, we no longer have to hold dodge after the ultimate, or no longer have to build the core passive after the ultimate. We can immediately start holding dodge. And my visual cue for this is as soon as you see the anchor icon back on the screen, once you see the core passive gauge reappear, you can start holding dodge and it will transition you into Ride the Rapids mode basically as quickly as you possibly can. There is a bit of a buffer window on this, so you can kind of time it and not be perfect and still get the earliest possible activation. But just note that if you hold dodge before you see this anchor icon, there's a good chance it will not read the input and you're just going to stand there. And if you do that, you absolutely will not get the second ultimate within the amplifier window. You can see right here, we're down to very little time to get there. So how are we getting the second ultimate within the amplifier window? Well, simply put, now that we're at double S3, we will build enough signature energy to build up our ultimate by just immediately holding basic and Ride the Rapids mode. We're not going to worry about building up any amount of Tidal Force stacks. We're just getting to the plunge and the ultimate as quick as humanly possible. So after you are done holding dodge and you have transitioned into Ride the Rapids mode, start holding down basic immediately and Karen will go right into the plunge out of it. This builds up 100 Tidal Force stacks, which is just enough signature energy and bonus to get the ultimate online. And you will see right here, just barely, it is frames close. I'm not kidding when I say this is very tight on the double S3 rotations. To be perfectly honest with y'all, if you are a double S3 Karen player, you have the hardest work ahead of you. It is much more difficult to hit this rotation perfectly than it is her triple S rotation. So this will take some practice. I had to do this a lot of times and actually pause to go in and make sure the amplifier window was still active for the ultimate, because it always came back up and then the amplifier window is gone because we're literally within frames of it running out. But as you can see, you just barely get it in, get the second ultimate off, and out of the ultimate, same thing as we've been doing before. We're going to use a single 3-ping to get half our core passive gauge back, and then we can swap to our next character, repeat the rotation for the rest of the run from there. So general idea is the first time we're doing a slightly slower rotation because there's no way to fit the double ultimate within the amplifier window. After the first rotation, we can fit 2 ultimates, but you have to be on point, and the second ultimate has to be the earliest possible hold basic so you get the plunge right out the gate. So let's go ahead and go through it the whole way. I'll annotate with the voice, have the stuff off to the side so you can practice, but double S3 Karenina with her signature weapon. Swap in dodge, 1 red 3-ping, hold dodge. 5 basic attacks, hold basic for the plunge, ultimate. Out of the ultimate, hold dodge when the anchor's back on screen. Use a blue 3-ping, then hold basic, ultimate again. On the way out, single red 3-ping, swap to your next attacker. Go through your physical rotation with your other 2 characters as you would. Slow back down. After your rotation's done, Karenina comes on. Hold dodge immediately. 5 basic attacks. Plunge with the hold basic. Do ultimate. Out of the ultimate, hold dodge as soon as you see the anchor. Hold basic immediately. Plunge. Cancel the ultimate as quick as you possibly can to get it in the amplifier window. Out of the ultimate, single red 3-ping, and then swap to your next attacker. There is your double S3 rotation for Karen. Let's go ahead and finish this off with the triple S rotation. All right, so once Karenina hits triple S, we gain the ability to do double ult rotations within the amplifier window for everything, including our first rotation. The reason this becomes much more feasible and a little bit less strict than the double S3 rotation is that at triple S, that's where Karenina gets the passive where after she has either swapped on the field or she has used Windrise Dawn, which is the tap basics while in Ride the Rapids mode, the 5 basics we use to spin the core passive gauge and build up the Tidal Force stacks. Doing either of those things will make the next plunge attack, the Surge Breach, that will have time stop on it. This makes it so even on our first rotation, both ultimates happen within the amplifier window, and on subsequent rotations, we can now do things like use a blue 3 ping and get more stacks before we do our second ultimate, as opposed to just doing it as soon as possible with minimal stacks because we have to beat the amplifier buff from running out. So let's go through and talk about what's different for triple S, but it's fairly similar to the double S3 rotation, especially at the start. So same thing as always, we come on the field, dodge cancel the animation, use a single red 3 ping to get ourselves to max core passive, and then hold dodge to go into ride the rapids mode. So same as the other ones, we're just going to do the 5 basics into the plunge, into the ultimate for our first one. You'll see if we look back a little bit, you will notice that once Karen starts going into the plunge animation, you will note that the amplifier buff window stops moving to indicate that time stop has happened. So we go into our first ultimate. From here, we always come out with a full core passive gauge thanks to the double S3 passive, so we can immediately hold dodge. And again, since we have now already done one ultimate that had some, or one plunge that had some time stop on it, we have a little bit more time to play with. So instead of going immediately into hold basic, what we're going to do is do a single blue 3 ping, then go into the plunge, and that will get the ultimate off just in time. That'll have a little bit more oomph behind it thanks to that extra blue 3 ping. So this is our first rotation. Every rotation after this will look exactly the same. So once I show you the second half, that'll be what you do for the rest of the run. As always, after the ultimate, make sure that you use a red 3 ping on the way out so the core passive gauge is half full for when Karen comes back next time. So from here, we'll go through, let the rest of the physical team do its thing, run through the rotation. Again, depending on what physical team you're running and what investment you're at, adjust your rotation to match here. With Karenina at triple S, I go ahead and opt for doing Veronica's quicker ult rotation since there's less swap cooldown time thanks to the triple S bonus passive on Karenina. But for the second rotation and on, it's going to be pretty simple. So we bring Karen on the field. We come in with a full core passive gauge thanks to the what we spent last time on the way out. So now we can immediately hold dodge and go into ride the rapids mode. Now, instead of doing the 5 basics into the plunge on the first ultimate, what we're actually going to do this time is for our first ultimate, we're going to do a blue 3 ping into the plunge. The reason for this is that the time stop on the plunge attack happens either A, after you have swapped Karen on the field, or B, after she uses Windrise Dawn. So in this case, since we've already got the guaranteed time stop on the plunge from the swap in, what we're going to do is save the basic spam for the second ultimate because that will then activate time stop on the second plunge attack as we do a double ult rotation. So this first one after we come on the field, blue 3 ping into hold basic, that causes the time stop. After the plunge, immediately go into the ultimate. Out of the ultimate, we'll have the full core passive gauge already built, so you go ahead, hold dodge. This will put you into ride the rapids mode immediately. From here, we spam our 5 basic attacks and then hold basic for the plunge, and you will see the timer stops. We've got at least a little bit left here, more than we did for double S3, that's for sure. So into the plunge, then the ultimate. Ultimate goes off within the amplifier window. And then one more red 3 ping on the way out, swap to your next attacker, repeat the rotations for the rest of the Warzone run from there. So, a little bit easier to handle than the double S3 rotation. You will not be missing the second ultimate by frames if you're slightly off. But do note, this window is still fairly close. You are going to want to make sure you're not making any notable mistakes because that window does remain fairly tight to get both ultimates. But, nonetheless, Karenina triple S rotation with her signature weapon. Swap in, dodge cancel, red 3 ping, hold dodge. 5 basic attacks, hold basic, cancel into ultimate. Out of the ultimate, hold dodge. Blue 3 ping, hold basic. Ultimate again. Out of this ultimate, red 3 ping, swap to your next attacker. Go through the rest of your physical rotation. comes on, does her quick ult, and we'll be back to Karenina. So for the second rotation on, swap in, hold dodge immediately, blue 3 ping into hold basic, ultimate. Out of the ultimate, hold dodge when you see the anchor icon. 5 basics to build up the core passive stacks. Hold basic for the plunge. Ultimate. Out of the ultimate, use a red 3 ping. Swap to your next attacker. There are all the rotations for Karenina. These should get you started and getting solid scores in Warzone right out the gate, regardless of your investment level. So with all of those covered, let's go ahead and put a wrap on this guide. All right, so that'll put a wrap on Karenina's guide for her new frame. As expected, Karenina is very strong. She's a breaker, and breakers are kind of absurd. I think she is a bit better overall tuned balance-wise than Kamui was, and I think it's nice that she is not this non-stop ultimate spamming machine, but nonetheless, she is still a massive boost for the physical team moving forward, and that's pretty welcome considering how heavy investment the physical team can be, especially on free-to-play players. With Karen's arrival, if you are running the meta team comprised of her, Selena, and Veronica, that is a team that has exactly 0 free characters, so it is a demanding element that comes with its own idiosyncrasies of the crit chance and all that stuff that comes with it. There is a reason that the most common units that get skipped in this game tend to be physical units, because some people just don't want to deal with the extra baggage and investment that comes with it, and I totally get it. That said, even at SS with her signature weapon and nothing else, she's still a massive boost to the physical team. Breakers are just that good, and she's going to be quite strong, and having a character that you can get at SS with her signature weapon and be that much of a boost for a team that doesn't really play well with free-to-play players is going to be pretty useful. And if we end up in another situation where Karen is somehow the meta tank on her team for 4 years, I don't think that's going to happen this time just because, well, we don't get A ranks anymore, so something tells me we're going to be replacing characters a little bit more rapidly, but that's a video topic for another time. But nonetheless, at least the physical team is going to have a tried and true breaker moving forward that will keep it afloat and relevant for quite some time. So once again, I want to thank you all for the patience. I didn't get as many vids out during Helentine's patch as I would have liked to because, to keep it simple, IRL decided to IRL all over my face more than a few times the last few weeks. So that kind of continued with the testing environment, getting it at the 11th hour with the translations not active, which effectively caused me to do this guide twice in a very short amount of time. Means I would be lying if I said I'm not concerned I missed something or made a mistake somewhere, but as always, I've done my best to give the best possible information I can, and I feel pretty comfortable with the rotations I've shared with you. I'm sure there's, as always, going to be little optimizations people find depending on the investment level, but Karen is such a fairly straightforward character in terms of getting to her ultimate and utilizing her core passive that I think these are going to be pretty close to what the final product is for a lot of players. So as always, if something didn't make sense, if you got questions, need a deeper explanation on something, feel free to leave me a comment down below. I try to answer those as regularly as I can. Let me know your plans for Karen. How heavy are you pulling? Are you glad to see our favorite tsundere back, ready to have a filthy mouth and be a brat to us while she frankly swings around a giant-ass anchor, which is kind of a little bit traumatizing for me personally because, if you haven't heard me say it like 5,000 times by now, I've been a competitive Guilty Gear player for over 24 years, and the sight of a character who's kind of a brat with an anchor can be a little difficult for me to navigate now and again. But nonetheless, Karen's fun to play. She was very interesting to try and get the kit parsed out on, and I think she's going to be a very welcome character for the physical team to just give it some stability. And I mean, it's a breaker. She's gonna do bad things to the game. We know what breakers are by now, so. But all of that said, thank you as always for your feedback and support. I appreciate all the input y'all give. Again, if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. And yeah, I'll be doing more videos this patch, assuming IRL can stop IRLing for a bit. I have plans to do a guide on Lucia's new leap. an updated Darkflow team guide, and then, of course, any other minor things I can talk about during the patch, or if I get one of those Yap video ideas in my head that won't leave, we'll try and get one of those out during the duration of Karenina's patch as well. There's also the concert that they have been talking about and advertising quite a bit coming up, so that should be interesting, if nothing else, just to take a look at. The music in PGR is, you know, kind of one of its biggest deals, so a live concert that's broadcast on the internet should be interesting, if nothing else. But that's going to do it for this one. As always, I appreciate you all. If you want to do the YouTube garbage on the way out, like, comment, subscribe. It's always appreciated. It's never necessary. But for now, I have been basically holed up in this office for the last 48 hours trying to get this guide done on time. And I guess if the patch just came up and you're watching this, then maybe I succeeded. And if it's not up till later, then I'll probably re-record this and you won't even know I said it. So, you know, butterfly effect and all that. But nonetheless, y'all take care, be good to each other, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.